Hello and welcome to Where Wendy Creates. Today we are making this beautiful quilt and we are going to work with focal blocks, we're going to work with half square triangles, and we're going to work with 4 patches. So see how you can turn your favorite fabrics into a beautiful, beautiful quilt. Today we're making our underwater quilt and I am cutting 9.5-inch strips, 8.5-inch strips, and then I'm going to do 4 patches out of our 5-inch strips. So I'm very, very excited to finally get started on my underwater quilt. So we are going to have some beautiful fabrics in this one, my friends. And this is the pattern I'm going to be making, but I want to have my outside border on all 4 sides being turtles. So I'm cutting off this edge and I'm only using these over here. Each one block equals 4 inches. It's going to be my ocean quilt. If I were making this entire thing, I would need 38.5-inch squares and 60 half square triangles. And to make the 60 half square triangles, I need 39.5 of one color, 39.5 of another color. This is a homemade pattern, my friends. It is not available for sale. However, yes, you can. If you can follow it from this, you can definitely have it. We're going to refer back to this pattern a few times. And 34 patch blocks. So I'm going to need 4 different colors, 4.5-inch square, and it's not 5-inch squares, it's 4.5-inch square strips. So we're going to have a whole 8.5, which is this up here, and then we're going to have the half square triangles, and then we're going to have the 4 patch, and then again the half square triangles, the whole blocks, and we're going to go on. And again, we're going to keep it to this size because I'm adding a beautiful turtle water block. So my fabric, 42-inch wide, will equal, if cut into 9.5-inch squares, I'll get 12 squares. I'm doing this the end of February. So we are having fun, and let's go ahead and get started. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to Where Wendy Creates. As we said, we are going to make a fish quilt. So I have my first stacks, 2 stacks of all of the fabrics that are going to be half of the 4 square block. So we're going to go ahead and take one at a time of each of these 2 fabrics, and we're going to stick them in our lap, right sides together, and we're going to go ahead and sew these together. I am so excited. This is a handmade, homemade pattern, and we are going to make this beautiful quilt, and I'm just going to go ahead and sew together the 4 patch strips. And again, this is absolutely gorgeous fabrics. They have shells and fish. They are matching coordinated pieces. And I think they are going to be gorgeous as 2 of our 4 fabrics in our 4 patch blocks. And we're just sewing these together. With our 1/4-inch seams. Okay, and let's go ahead and sew one more together, and then we will zip together the rest of the bunch and come straight back. And this is, again, a quilt that we have designed, Sylvia and myself. And we have these 4.5-inch pieces width of fabric. And then we will cut them into 4.5 strips with the 2 colors, and sew the other 2 and then match them together. And I do like to keep a pair of scissors by the ironing board or on the ironing board and press in between each stage. That way pressing or ironing is not oppressive. I do have my iron set to the hottest setting. I have some water in here, and that way we're going to get steam. And I'm going to trim each of these because I chain stitch them, trim them each in between each with the fabric, and I'm going to press them towards the blue or the darker side, and that way when I match them together, they're all going to be laying, the seams are going to be laying the correct direction to match them to the other two for the 4-patch. And when I press, I'm going to go ahead and lock in the stitch by ironing it flat. And then I'm going to be opening up the blue to the top and just pressing backwards. And that way my seams are all going to be towards the blue in the back section, and it's going to make it easier. And now we have all of our first beautiful strips for the 4-patch blocks pressed and sewn together. We're going to do the other 2, and then we'll cut them. We have our beautiful jellyfish and our turtles. We're going to put them together with the fabric, and we're just going to sew all of these pieces together for our other side of our 4-patch block. And I find sewing them together in strips prior to sewing them so much easier. String caught underneath. have my fingers just like this and I have the fabric going through it. And that way it's holding it in place a lot easier. What a beautiful pile of half of my 4-patch squares. Woohoo! Lay your strip out. Press the seams, lock in the stitches. And then we're going to flip it over, and the darker color is going to be towards us. Lay it out the length of your ironing board if we've done the width of fabric. And I'm just going to lift up the blue, and I'm gently going to press it backwards so that the seam is on the darker color, not the lighter color. And then I'll go back over it and press it solid. And we have our 4-patch fabric sewn into 2 strips of fabric per sewing. And now we're going to go ahead and cut them up. And I'm laying 3 strips on top of each other so that I am doing more than one at a time. And my original block measurements were 4.5 inches because remember on the graph paper, our blocks are 4 inches per graph paper block. So let's go ahead and trim these up. I'm going to start trimming them by getting the selvage off. So we're going to go ahead and cut the selvage off. I'm going to line up my line so I know I'm straight across the fabric without any directional issues. Oopsie. And we're going to keep the scraps because you know I like to be scrappy. So we're going to move around here and we're going to take it down to 4.5 inches. This is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 inch ruler. I'm not using the 5.5 inch ruler. And we're going to put that line straight across. We're going to have one of the lines straight across the center, 4.5 inches. And we're going to go ahead and cut all of these. Now by laying 3 on top of each other, I'm cutting 3 pieces at the same time. So I'm making quicker work of it, but you have to be slow and be accurate. So that is kind of extremely important. So we're just going to lay those blocks to the side, get our rulers out of the way, and go on with the next 4.5, and so on, and so on, and so on, lining up our centers and our edges, making sure we're on 4.5 inches, and cutting them away. And we're going to do this to the entire strip and to the next set of strips. And some left for scrappy quilts. very, very important to watch what you're doing. If you mess up, just make a straight edge and continue. You know we have extra, so it doesn't matter that much because we do have that 2.5, 3-inch extra. And we need the 4.5 inches because we have the 1/4 inch seam on both sides. So that takes up the 1/2 inch. And we have a beautiful stack of blocks for half of our 4-patch. Let's get the rest. And realign them as you need to. Move on that. Remeasure in a moment. All right, a little bit smaller excess on this one. Beautiful still for a scrappy quilt. we have our 4 patches done, we're bringing them over to the iron, and we're going to go ahead and take them one at a time, and we're going to press those seams open. We're on a cotton setting, high heat, and we're just going to press the whole stack open. And now we're taking our 9.5-inch strips. That's going to be our half square triangle. We're lining up our 9.5, our 9.5. We're holding it, and we're cutting the stack. Now I have used 2 coordinating fabrics. These are the leftover pieces. We're going to keep those for a future project. And now we're going to take these pieces that we have just cut. We are going to lay them out and put their coordinating fabric face to face. So I'm going to make it face to face, and we're going to grab a couple of pins and pin these 2 together, and then we will be marking our stitch line that we're going to stitch a 1/4 inch away from on both sides, and then we will cut in the center. And we're going to take our pins and we're going to put a pin in the middle on either side. We're going to take our ruler, and because this is dark fabric, we're going to use a white pencil, and we're going to line it up from corner to corner. And we are going to make our mark. Oopsie. And we're going to go ahead and do that on the next grouping here prior to putting our pins in. Let's make it a little bit simpler on ourselves, shall we? And the white pencil that I'm using now, you can use a white marker if you have it. You can use anything because we're going to be cutting it off. But this one just happens to be a white water-soluble pencil that I can use for any and all of my sewing. If you are not happy with the line being produced, remember, we are marking the cut line. So if you're going to use something other than a pencil that's specifically made for fabric, make sure you use something that is not going to bleed and get past your 1/4 inch seam line. Remember, this is a cut line. We sew on either side of it, so this is never going to show on our final product because it is the cut line. Continue to cut all of your 9.5 inch strips into your 9.5 inch blocks. I use this one for the long cut, and for the drawing, I use my 12.5 inch ruler for the measurement of the 9.5. Start with your 1 by 1 in the corner, bring it over to the 9.5 and to the 9.5. Once you are lined up, double check, and then make your blocks. Put them right sides together. Keep your scraps. Right sides together, line them up, then draw your lines. I'm going to go pop these with an iron real quick. Since we are making, using borders on this quilt, I only need 20 of these put together. So that means I have back to back, face to face, 40 pieces of fabric. And we've got our line, we've got them penned. Now we're ready to go over to the sewing machine and stitch 1/4 inch on either side. We're sewing 1/4 inch on either side of this line. So if you see, we have the point running right down the red line. And we have sewn 1/4 inch on either side of the red line. You can see it better on that side. We're sewing 1/4 inch on either side of this line. So if you see, we have the point running right down the red line. And we have sewn a 1/4 inch on either side of the red line. You can see it better on that side. And now we're going to take all of our pins out of our blocks. We're going to press in the stitches, or lock our stitches by pressing. And then we're going to come back and cut our blocks in half. And I have the iron on a hot setting on cotton with a little bit of steam in there. And I'm just going to go ahead and lock in those stitches by popping each one with a hot iron, making sure I don't have any other wrinkles. And then we're going to go over to the cutting board. It's nice to iron between each step, and that way your fabric is wrinkle-free, your stitches are set, and you don't run into any issues. And we're kind of doing a quality control at the same time we're pressing. Each step should have quality control, where you're making sure that everything is stitched, no threads are hanging, nothing is over. You're not seeing anything that you shouldn't be seeing. And we're going to go ahead and cut our half square triangles, making sure that we have the side that we put the line on face up. We're going to go corner to corner and cut on that line with our rotary blade. And we're just going to stack all of these to the side and go through our stack. And then back to the iron to open them all up. Such beautiful fabric. I am so excited about this quilt. What do you think about my underwater quilt? I would love, my friends, if you gave me a thumbs up and hit that by hitting the like button. And if you give me a comment, I love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever made an underwater quilt? I would love, 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 love to see what your underwater quilt looks like. And you can tell me about it in the comments. And tell me if you like, what kind of quilt do you want me to make next? I would love to know. I have lots and lots of different fabric choices, and sometimes it's real hard for me to decide what to make next. So if I have the kind of fabric, I would love to go ahead and make that next. Let me know what kind of quilt you would like me to make next in the comments. Okay, we've sewn and cut our half square triangles. Now we're going to go ahead and press them open. So with each of our triangles, what I need to do is go ahead and press the seams, locking in actually we already did that. We've already locked in the stitches. So now I just have to press them open. And I've got it on a cotton setting with water inside. So this makes quicker work of our triangles and getting them ironed. And I am so excited. That looks so good. That is just, I love that. Okay, absolutely gorgeous. I'm loving those two colors together. And I'm gonna go through these and hopefully I will feel the same about all of them. Look at that, absolutely bold and beautiful. And again, just go through your pile one at a time, open them up, press them, and then we'll go back over to the cutting board to get rid of these tails, if you will, and to make sure that they are the perfect measurement. I believe that's an 8.5, but we're going to look at our pattern and double check before we cut. Always measure twice, cut once. So accuracy is slow, slow is accurate, and measure twice, cut once. So if you're having trouble quilting, go ahead and write that in lipstick on your mirror, or put that on a note card and pin it up, magnet it up. Accurate is slow and slow is accurate. And measure twice, cut once. I'm going to go ahead and keep going through this stack. Remember, we use 10 different fabrics. I have 4 different blocks out of that, so that's making 8 of these half square triangles per color combination that we made. Oh, look at that. I am loving that. Those two are bold and beautiful. Okay, so this is going to be a happy, cheery quilt. Sometimes we doubt ourselves, but oh yes, this is going to be beautiful. Oh, I love that. These are almost like zodiac signs, aren't they? Just awesome. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and press the rest of these, and then I will meet you back over at the cutting table so we can continue. And we have our stack of 40 half square triangles ready to lay out and start sewing them together with the other blocks. Just when you thought I was done, I forgot I have to trim them up. So we are going to trim these down to our correct size, which we know is the 8.5-inch square. So we use the 9.5 to give us plenty of leeway if we had one cut wrong or if we sewed it wrong. So now we're going to trim off our extra approximately 1/2 inch to make them our 8.5-inch squares. Ooh. Eight and a half by 8.5. And And we just had a very thin piece there. Don't think I have any up here. Little string. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and trim down all of our blocks to the 8.5, and then what after that? Well, we have to trim down our 4 patch squares to our 8.5 as well. That's a 9, down to 8.5, down to 8.5. Okay, and it's nice to have an extra little weight on it, and that way you are less likely to slip. And we do want to turn them around at each time, remeasure, get right on that 8.5 inch mark. And trim them down. And we're going to do that to each one. And I do want to show you I am switching rulers because this 12.5 inch ruler does have the line straight down the middle. So this is the ruler that I want. On the one side, I have used the little stick-em-a-bobs, so it's not going to move as easy when I rotary. And again, I've got my center line. So I'm going to line that center line up on my line. I have my 8.5 inch mark, and it's directly on that line. Then I will cut it, flip it around, and trim off the remainder of the 1/4 inch or so. Making sure that I have that. And this line right here is my 8.5, but this is the guiding line. See, it's a little bit wider on one side. That may indicate that the block was either cut wrong or that the seam allowance is a little bit different. So again, using that center line makes it much, much easier, but you do have to do the measurement twice on each block to get that perfectly square 8.5 that you are looking for. And again, take your time lining that up. There we go, a beautiful 8.5. Okay, and our last half square triangle. We flip it around, put our center line, line it up with the 8.5 and the 8.5. Making sure our center line is straight. And now, my lovelies, we are starting our 4 patch. And we are moving our 4 patch blocks into an 8.5 inch block. So if you did it the way I instructed, you are looking at having it within a 1/16 of an inch of being accurate. So this is a wonderful place to start. So where you are over, you want to go ahead and trim it down. So we're going to put our ruler directly at one of the centers. So if we're doing an 8.5, it should be 4 1/4 to be our center, right at the 4 1/4 line. And you're going to trim off any excess outside of that 4 1/4. So we have a perfect 8.5 inch block to go with our half square triangles. Now we're going to cut up our solid blocks as well. And if you're lucky, what we cut off of our 4-patch blocks is going to be very, very minimalist. And now, my friends, we are cutting out the focal block. So I'm going to line this up. These are 8.5-inch squares that I need. So I'm just trimming off the selvage to start. And I'm going through quite a few layers. Maybe I should have thinned those out a bit. And we are measuring over 8.5 inches. And we're doing an 8.5 by 8.5 inch square. Moving it over to 8.5. Up a little bit, making sure we're level. And we're cutting our 8.5-inch squares out of our strips. And we're going to do that for all of our focal pieces. And then we're ready to lay out the quilt and start stitching. I am so excited. Are you excited? I am so excited. And let's see if by any possibilities, this piece might be 8.5 inch. Wouldn't that be magnificent? Fold these out, press them. Oh my goodness, my friends, look at this. It is 9.25 by 8.5. All of these are going to be cut into our 8.5-inch squares. That's wonderful. And we're making 8.5-inch strips out of our next set of focal strips. And I apologize, I'm getting in the way of the camera here. And bringing it over to 8.5 inches. Lining it up. And let's trim this. And we'll trim our next 8.5, and we'll do that with our 2 remaining strips. And I'm following my pattern to lay out my quilt block pieces. I'm loving it. All right. All right, my friends, so we are 10 rows down, 8 rows across, and our quilt, I'm loving it. Can you see just a little bit of pattern showing up there? And I think the underwater quilt may be on the verge of being too busy, but I think I'm in love. All right, so now we start numbering our pieces, numbering our blocks, and sewing our strips together. Woohoo! So we are taking our blocks off of our bed and we are sewing them together one by one. Once we have them sewn together one by one, we're taking them, folding them over, and going to the sewing machine and sewing this together. So 2 by 2s. And make sure your blocks are perfectly lined up. The seams are being held and doing what they're supposed to be doing. And sew at your 1/4 inch seams. And a good way to mark these is to get some small notes and pin them on it, or get your sticky notes and pin them on it so you know what row, or pick them up one at a time. Bring them to the sewing machine. Make sure you put scissors pointing to the edge that you have to sew, or do a pin and a note so that you don't have to bring out Mr. Seam Ripper. Nobody likes to have to use Mr. Seam Ripper too often. And then we're going to take these out of the sewing machine, bring them back to our layout board or our bed where we have this laid out, and lay it back where it goes. And once you have sewn your blocks together, we come back to the bed and lay them out. So we see we have this row over here. We need to line it up with this one. And it looks like that one's going to go right here. And we line this row up, and it's got to go on the bottom. So this one has to be the top row. And we have our 4 patch coming down, we have our 4 patch coming down, we have these coming down. So we're going to lay out this one to match up with the rest of the rows. And then we're going to come up here and grab some others and hold on to them where we need to sew them. So far. And I find that without the sticky notes, I can carry one in my teeth, one in each hand, and lay them down properly, putting the scissor blade on top of them so I know where they're going to lay, so then I can sew them together. And yes, my friends, pens are going to be very, very helpful. And since I'm not using pens, I'm doing one at a time. Very slowly, very gently, double checking to make sure everything is always perfectly lined up. Holding at the top or the bottom. And holding it all the way through so it doesn't torque or pull. And lining up our next, making sure our seam at the top and our seam on the 4 patch are behaving, and that our corners align, our sides align. then, of course, we are back in here. We're going to lay out our blocks where they match up. And now that we have our rows put together, all of our blocks into rows, we're going to take our rows to our ironing board, and on the cotton steam setting, we're going to go ahead and press to make sure all of our seams are going in, are pressed down, and that our quilt pieces look crisp and happy. We're going to do this to all of our rows, making sure we are pressed and ready to put our rows together with our seams behaving and laying flat. And we're getting all of the rows sewn together, the blocks sewn together into rows. And next we're going to be doing the rows after we finish putting together the top 2 rows. And now, my friends, we have begun to sew our rows together. We want to match each seam, make sure it's laying the proper way that we've pressed it. And having the 2 strips laying together, one on top of each other prior to starting, would make it a lot easier. And as you go, pin or hold each of your seams to make sure they line up perfectly. Make sure your seams are laying the way you've pressed them. We're checking each seam as we go, holding on to them, keeping our fingers on them as they come closer to the stitching. And then at the end, holding our corners and our pieces together, making sure a seam lays properly. And if we end our blocks perfect, that means we've trimmed, we've pressed, we've done our 1/4 inches, we've done everything properly. Okay, let me pull this one out. And when our seams and our edges come together so perfectly in line, it's just a beautiful thing. All right, let's go lay this out. All right, now we're going to lay our 2 rows that we've sewn out with our others. Line them back up. Make sure there's no errors in the process. All right, so scared me for a second, but they are lining up, so I'm very excited about that. And we are just going to straighten these 2 up, and then we're going to grab the next 2 rows, fold them over, and bring them out to the sewing machine. And when we fold them over, we're going to take our hands, we're going to grab the first couple of seams to say, hey, Wendy, don't change your fingers. We're bringing it to the sewing machine, and this is the side we sew. And we're letting our 2 rows drape right in front of our table. We're taking our first couple of seams, lining them up, foot down, hold your threads if you've got them short, and then we can begin our row. And again, your hands immediately go back to your first seams. Make sure that they are properly seated. You hold your fingers on them as they come up to where you're stitching. Do not let go of that spot. And just like we pressed in between our row blocks, we are pressing our rows. So in between throwing it back on the bed or your design wall, make sure you take your stop at your iron and your ironing board and press your seams. And that way, you will feel that much more accomplished, and it's so much easier to press as you go instead of waiting till the end to press your masterpiece. And again, if we've pressed everything else, we're just pressing this center seam where we've just joined our 2 rows. And you have a lot more seams now, bulk in your seams. So give yourself an extra couple of seconds. Slow is accurate, and accurate is slow. Oh my goodness. And a crisp, beautiful, freshly done quilt top. I'm telling you, is there anything else like it? Is there anything else like it? Now, between grabbing anything to sew next, always lay out what you've just sewn. Make sure that everything is correct now before it gets too far ahead of you. And I'm matching up each seam, holding them tight before I get there. And again, we're matching up our seams before we get there. That's where I would put a pin if I were pinning it, and I'm holding on to it. And I do not let go of that space until I'm right on top of it. Perfectly even. Yay! Well, I don't know about you, but I'm excited. I am now putting 2 rows together with 2 rows, and I've got another 3 of these doubles to do, and then we will put the quilt half together. I'm so excited. And then I get to show you my completed top minus my borders. And I'm wondering, being respectful to your time, sometimes I don't show you putting on my borders. Do you want to see me put on my borders or not need to see me put on my borders? Just maybe put a border in a short video for you, less than 60 seconds. Please hit the comments. I really need to know. Do you want me to publish the videos prior to putting on the outside border? Or do you want me to wait and have it longer to show the outside border being cut and put on the quilt and pressed? So let me know your thoughts. They are important. So are you just interested in the quilt tops with the borders okay to be a second short video? Or do you want me to wait on publishing the video until I have it all together and show you the borders on the same video? And notice I'm holding it out here. It helps me with the weight. And even if there's no weight, it's just a row, I hold it a little bit closer because that helps me guide it through the sewing machine. And again, anything I do helps me, so I'm hoping that it helps you at the same time. That's the purpose of the video. And of course, if you're not making a quilt, maybe it's just fun to watch the beautiful fabrics. Let me know your thoughts. Your input is valuable. You see me go a little over a 1/4 inch there? That was a bummer. Okay, last block, and yes, we are lining up nicely. Very excited. Sweet. All right, and what do we have? We have some prettiness coming together, I think. And we're laying this out on the ironing board, and we are going to put on the cotton setting with the steam and press our seams, which pressing at each step makes it so much easier in the end. And then if we can keep ourselves lightly folded or go directly to the finishing process of attaching the quilt top, the quilt backing, and the batting all together, whether on our domestic machine or through the assistance of a long arm quilter, it just makes that so much crisper and nicer. And trust me, you do not want to have to pay your long arm quilter to press your quilt again prior to being able to finish your quilt. So it's always a great idea to press in between each step, and that way you have a much more beautiful piece. And we have just come from the ironing board. We're putting our bottom 4 rows back on the bed, and we're turning up our next 2 onto the 2 above it. Now we're going to take these and go sew these together, these 2 double rows. Learn as you do this the beautiful feel of when your seams nest together, one going one direction, one going the other, thin, crisp, freshly pressed. It feels good. And it looks good. Uh-oh. Look what I did. Tried to get off of my being even. I feel like saying drum roll please. We have in my lap the last two sides going together of our beautiful underwater quilt. And if you haven't already, my friends, I would be grateful if you have enjoyed this video to hit that subscribe button. And I'd love to have you on my journeys going forward. And give me a thumbs up or a like. And when you do that, it does help me keep my video available for others to see. The more likes and comments that I have. And again, I would be greatly appreciative and honored. And I'm trying to support the bulk of the weight as I sew. Kind of as we go, I'm holding the seams. I'm scraping with my fingers the back of the quilt to help keep it in line with itself. So both layers, this one doesn't pull out too much. And see how it comes up and it starts pulling down this way? That's why you need to lift the whole quilt and kind of help guide it with you as you go. Just make sure you're lined up, your seams are in the right direction. And sometimes I use my hand to help with the bulk of the weight pulling it up. Every time I see this batik fabric, I feel like I'm looking at the front of it instead of the back of it. But one thing great about batik fabric is the dye is all the way through and it's just as beautiful almost on both sides. Some batiks, it's hard to tell which is the front and which is the back. So you really got to look at it in the right light and kind of jiggle it sometimes to know which side you're looking at. All right. So now we have our quilt top finished, except for the border of the turtles that I'm going to put around it. So again, hit that comment if you didn't earlier. I'm going to finish this video now. We'll do the border in a real quick short video to show you. But right now, I'm going to go fluff this out on the bed so you can see it, and then we'll put it on the design wall, see if that helps as well. Yay! Okay, we'll see if I can figure out which way is up, which way is down. Get this laid out so we can take a closer look at it. And again, it's going to have the borders on the side of the turtles that I showed you in the beginning. But I am pretty excited, pretty impressed with this quilt. I hope that you like it as well. And it's not as detailed pattern as the stripes and rows that I thought would really pop on this. But I'm still very impressed with the design. I used the focal block, I used the half square triangles, and I used the 4-patch for a quick, easy, fun quilt that shows off the different fabrics that I thought was just really water and really exciting, fun blocks. So what do you think, my friends? Woo! Okay, let's throw it on the design wall and take a look. All right, so we have our finished quilt hanging sideways on this rack. Let's see if I can go ahead and turn the phone sideways. That way you see it up and down. Kind of sideways, up and down. And our fish quilt. I'm loving it. What do you think? Our fish quilt is complete. And I love it. What do you think?